Welcome, everyone. I'm Clara McKay, CEO of the World Ovarian Cancer Coalition. Thank you so much for joining the third installment of our Global Ovarian Cancer Summit series. This series is themed around the 6 goals outlined in our Global Ovarian Cancer Charter that we launched earlier this year. So the theme of this session is supportive care and meeting the needs, information and support needs of women and their families and loved ones. So this session is specifically focused on highlighting the crucial role that patient advocacy organizations play in this area. I am really delighted to introduce Robin Cohen, who will be chairing today's session. Robin is a board member of the World Ovarian Cancer Coalition, but also a founder and CEO of the Sandy Roman Ovarian Cancer Foundation based in the US. And Robin's organization provides a lot of excellent services too, so she can bring that into the discussion as well. So Robin, on that note, if I could turn the session over to you.
Thank you, Clara. Thank you everyone for being here. It's such an honor for me to be here with all of you and with all of these esteemed colleagues of mine. I would like to introduce to you now Frances Reed, who is the Program Director of the World Ovarian Cancer Coalition. And she's going to give you some highlights of the Every Woman study as it relates to supportive care. Frances?
Thank you very much, Robin. For those of you that don't know, the Every Woman study was a large online survey, very complex, covering a vast range of issues for women diagnosed in the previous 5 years. 1,531 women took part from 44 countries in 15 languages. And you can see with the picture on the globe, some countries are in larger letters. We had more respondents from these countries, and we were actually able then to show that there were variations between countries in lots of different measures. And variations mean there are opportunities to make progress. We were very fortunate to have findings of the study published last year in the International Journal of Gynecological Cancer, and there will be a link at the end of this talk. So in terms of information, we were able to show that a lack of knowledge about even the very basics of ovarian cancer, or even women having heard of ovarian cancer, and the fact that women weren't given information about the tests they were having, it meant that 6 in 10 women, when they were told they had ovarian cancer, it was a complete shock. They had no idea this was a possibility. More than half of the women did not get the information they needed at the point of diagnosis. And that figure actually went down when we asked them about the whole experience since their time of diagnosis, with just 1 in 5 able to find information that they needed at the time that they needed it. And I said there were country variations, and this is a little example here. So the proportion of women who found all the information that they needed at the time that they needed it varied from just 4% in Japan to considerably higher in some other countries, but still only 1/3 of women in Italy found the information that they needed. In the preliminary interviews, women reported that a lack of information caused significant distress. And 30% of women said they found information on the internet, but that it was very scary. And if you think about the diagnosis itself, for 1 in 6 women, 15%, the doctor who told them this life-changing information spent less than 5 minutes telling them they had ovarian cancer. And the most common time period was between 5 and 15 minutes. Very little time to absorb such news. Those who felt they had received sufficient information were those who were more likely to have received written information, or they had spent a longer time with the doctor. What did we count as information? We counted oral information. Doctors spoke to them. And most of the information that was given was indeed verbal. 92% was verbal information. Just 4 in 10 were given any form of written information. Less than 1 in 3 were given contact details for their healthcare team managing their care. And just 1 in 10 received information about living with cancer, not just general information about ovarian cancer and treatments. and just 1 in 10 women were actually given any information on sources of support. So a huge, huge headline that not enough information is reaching the front line in hospitals, even in countries where great information exists. We asked about support needs, and here we're talking initially about emotional support. And in terms of quality of life, women said that their mental well-being was as important to them as their physical well-being in terms of their quality of life. And they were also desperate to get a sense of purpose, an ability to engage in hobbies and activities, to just feel a little bit more normal. We asked them what the most challenging thoughts and difficult feelings were that they had. And there were many difficult thoughts and feelings altogether, but we asked them then to narrow it down to the ones that were most challenging. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the fear of cancer coming back, the fear of dying, the fear of treatment not working, all major, major issues. We have included in here also getting life back on track, loss of fertility, regaining sexual intimacy. These were also important, bigger than they're sort of indicated here. These were the most important issues. Interestingly, of course, there were age differences. So older women much more concerned about the fear, younger women much more concerned about fertility and sexual issues. So we've talked about managing fear of recurrence and death. There were also significant problems in terms of managing long-term side effects many months, years after treatment, including fatigue, loss of interest in sex, anxiety and depression, and isolation. Only 1 in 2 have met another woman with ovarian cancer in person. But it isn't just about emotional support either. There's practical and financial needs that are really significant and can vary by age as well. Just under a third said their personal finances had been affected to a great extent, and just over a third to some extent. We asked when support is needed, and this may not come as a surprise to you at all. Obviously, at the point in diagnosis, and if for the moment you just focus on the dark teal colour in the graph, so at the point of diagnosis was the most critical point. But we know, and this is very common, that once a woman's treatment is finished, there is a strong sense of isolation, of abandonment, of not knowing how to move forward from a very sort of complex treatment position. And then also if the cancer returns and if cancer is incurable, it's not just about the diagnosis. I included this graph though to show that, you know, there are cultural differences in all of this. And certainly in the interviews with Japanese women, several of the Japanese women put forward a brave face, as this quote from Kyoko on the right-hand side shows, to say that outwardly she put on a face that said she is completely fine, but it wasn't the case. And it was very exhausting doing that. And it's interesting then to see in the graph here that actually Japanese women had less support needs at diagnosis and after initial treatment. But then if the cancer returned or they were told it was incurable, it almost hit even harder because this brave face had been damaged. Just 28% of women were offered some form of support by a healthcare professional. We asked, did women ask for help? And this little graph shows the variations in women saying they didn't seek help and weren't offered help. This is despite needing help. So 1 in 5 didn't ask for help or weren't offered any help at all when they needed it. So there is a great need to improve levels of support. And we asked women where were they getting their support, and the biggest respondents were from family and friends. So the dark green is where did you get the support, and the orange is who gave you the most support. I would love to see more in terms of the nurse specialists, support groups, helplines, charities, all featuring more highly. But I think you'll also notice this here, the women with ovarian cancer, major source of support for others. Implications for charities and not-for-profit. Getting information to women ideally at diagnosis is absolutely critical. The number of women who find charities later on and say, I really wish I had known. There's a real need for a range of support and information offered. And we really need to make sure healthcare professionals link women to not-for-profit organisations who can help. Not-for-profits and charities really do provide an important service that can help doctors and nurses in their own job. And just to remember that women would really much rather be in a group where they meet other women with ovarian cancer as well. Not a gynae cancer group, but an ovarian cancer group. The links to the reports, they're on our website, and the IJGC article are here and again on the event portal. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Frances. Some things that really stood out to me, my background is also oncology nursing. And, you know, the number one question that I'm often asked is not how long will I live, but how will I live? And so the mental and emotional support is so vitally important. And of course, the time issue as a nurse stood out to me as well, because, you know, nurses and physicians are limited in time that we have with our patients. But really an advocacy group that offers support information is a gift to any nurse or any doctor, because it alleviates a lot of the work, takes the work off of their plates if they know about the resources and if they make the referral, which is always the challenge. So I would like to get some feedback from the other panelists, to see what your thoughts are. Runzi, we'll start with you. Did anything stick out, especially for you and the work that you do?
Yeah, thank you, Robin. First of all, my pleasure to be a part of this very important panel discussion, and thank you for the invitation. So as far as our patients or the ones that we reach out via our programs, one of the things we do here repeatedly is not just at the onset of diagnosis, but through their journey of treatment. The information, there is a huge gap in information in the sense and also in certain terms, there is too much information also, which is overwhelming at the point of diagnosis. A patient is given a lot of information that she may not be in the position to digest at that point in time. And to your point, Robin, I think having nonprofit organizations come in and, you know, pace it for the patient in the sense that, and provide that information at a time when she is more receptive to it. It's all about the timing issue, because there are certain hospitals or big centers that we work very closely with. We know that there is no lack of information there. I mean, there is like I said, there's an overabundance of information, if you will, but it does not come at the right moment. It comes either too early or at a phase where she's going through intensive treatment and not really receptive to it. So I think the advocacy organizations have a big part to play in this, in the sense, as you said, working with the nurses and the doctors to kind of coordinate the timing so that not only does she get optimal information, but also timely. You know, I think the two things need to work together for the patient to be fully informed about the next steps.
Thank you. Maud, I would like to get your feedback. You are in Malawi, Africa. So I think you probably have a unique perspective, but what stood out to you with the results of the Every Woman study?
Okay, thank you very much to be part of this beautiful conversation. What I could say, actually, looking at the context of our country, we actually look at the number of patients per doctor. It's quite huge. For example, in our country, we only have about 2 oncologists against a population of 18 million, which is quite a big number. And you find that these doctors are centered in one area and they don't exist in other areas. So these doctors have so much to do, they've got so much work. And rightly said, we believe that palliative care starts from the beginning. Once a patient walks in, as you refer them you refer them to the continuum of care, they have to know what is actually going on. They should be advised accordingly. So all that information, that care, the psychosocial support should start from the beginning. We find that when that happens, even when the patient is being treated, I think there's acceptance of treatment because of the way things started from the beginning. So all the counseling, the psychosocial support is very important for their mental health. It is very important. So that is one thing we have tried as much as possible as an organization to talk with the health sector, with the Ministry of Health, to put that as something which is very important. And I think in some areas they are trying to do something about it, but I think it's a system which is actually very overwhelmed. If you're looking at 2 oncologists against 18 a population of 18, it's not very easy. But I think some systems are working, and we can give them a bit of credit, because now I think what they're trying to do, as the speaker just gone before me, is that they have put in place organizations which can help, and they do have a palliative department, and they do have other sections in the hospital or in the Ministry of Health where they can help one another when it comes to psychosocial support.
Thank you. No, I'm sure that that's a whole other set of challenges when you only have a couple physicians treating all of these patients. I'm sure time is a big issue there. Sue, how about you? Did anything specific stand out to you in the findings?
Yeah, I guess I particularly picked up on the only 1 in 5 women having the information that they want. And I think as, you know, patient organisations, we often have a lot of information, but it's actually getting it to the women. And I think, you know, it's been a great discussion around timeliness. You know, I think it's one of our biggest challenges as patient organisations is to make sure that the great work we're doing, the women are aware of. So I think that that's a really critical thing. And I guess too, hearing from the women around what they want, you know, and making sure that what we're offering them, what their unmet needs are. So also that stat around 38% of women having the fear of the cancer coming back. So at Ovarian Cancer Australia, we developed a booklet specifically addressing that need. So I think part of the challenge is understanding what the needs are, and then developing the resource, and then marketing and getting that resource out to the women, and making sure that the health professionals are aware of, you know, what the organisation has, and that they're a trusted brand to refer to as well. I think it's really important, because clinicians won't refer to, you know, in Australia anyway, our experience is, unless they've got a lot of trust in the organisation and how that information's developed. So I think that's sort of critical as well to getting that buy-in of the health professionals.
Right. And I liked what you said about, you know, the recurrence. You know, ovarian cancer is a unique disease in that it is somewhat of a never-ending disease. So our support services really don't have an end as in other diseases. Chara, what about you? Chara's joining us from Spain today.
Yeah.
What did you take away from the findings from the Every Woman study?
Well, I think it is very interesting and very distressing at the same time, because we can see that there are many needs that are not covered. And for example, I agree that the emotional point is most important. And that's why we have been running for some years now, since 2014, a project that we call Wellness Project. And we offer psychological support to patients, not only to patients that are associated in our association, our organization, but any patients, you know, because we are an association that is of public utility, and we cannot do anything if it isn't for every patient, not only for associated. And well, I think that there are some points, of course, so during your illness, that are most important to have psychological support. That's when you are given the diagnosis, of course, that's a shock. And I agree that after you have finished your chemotherapy, there is a very bad moment, because you have been attending the hospital very often, and you have been able to speak to your doctors about your problems, your doubts. And at that point, you are lost. In fact, you feel lost. And of course, there are many, many cases of recurrency in ovarian cancer, and that's a problem. But this is logical, that is distressing, yes.
Yeah, it's that roller coaster ride. You're going, and then the roller coaster stops. You get
Yes,
off and you're like, what happened to me? And you
what
feel
happened
very
to me?
alone. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yes, moreover, you are quite weak at this point and you have no hair and there are many, many things that you think about and your future, you don't know what may happen. Yes, that's a very difficult time.
Yes, thank you. And so we have these advocacy organizations have wonderful support services and information to share. The challenge is, how do we get that information to the women that need it? And Sue, I know that at Ovarian Cancer Australia, you've had much success with access to care. And I think you did that through a specific marketing strategy. Can you share a little bit about that?
Thanks, Robin. You know, just building on what I mentioned earlier, I think critical to the success of being able to grow the distribution of our resources and particularly our resilience kits. So I think we saw there in the Every Woman study that it's at that point of diagnosis that there's that high information need. So we have our resilience kit that we distribute and aim to get to all women at the point of diagnosis. And the way that we've been able to really increase distribution is by building our health professional database. So we've got a database now of over 1,000 health professionals that we communicate with throughout the year. So we have a health professional newsletter where we profile our new resources. So I mentioned the fear of recurrence. We've also developed a partners program, a male carers program. So anything new we're developing, we distribute out via that database of, you know, the 1,000 clinicians working in the field. So building that relationship with them has been critical. And as I said, that sort of trusted brand, we've got a really strong marketing team that we've worked with. We've used paid Facebook ads. We've also redeveloped our website and made ordering resources much easier, and twice a year as a support team. So there's 12 of us now that work in the support team. We sort of have a whole group telethon out to all of those health professionals and touch base with them, let them know about the resources we've got and, you know, order them resources, show where they can access them. And I think that marketing is, you know, throughout the year, as I'm sure anyone that works in a organisation knows, it's an ongoing process of always being able to get out what you do have. And as I said earlier, I think it's really critical to make sure what you're offering is what women want. And I think, you know, these rapid changes with PARP inhibitors and how that's going to impact recurrence rates. So in Australia, recurrence is at about 70% for women with stage 3-4 disease. But we know with some new medications coming, being listed, that recurrence rate will change. So we're doing another survey back to our women this year to say, what is it that you want from us? And that's where we developed the fear of recurrence resource, because women strongly said that was something that they wanted. We've implemented a nurse-led telephone case management service, and that's where women get their own ovarian cancer support nurse via Ovarian Cancer Australia, and that's been incredibly popular because, again, in our survey, women said, you know, I want my own nurse. There's nurses in breast care and there isn't in ovarian cancer. So I think really critical to the success has been checking in with the women and making sure that what we're offering is what they want. So, but not an easy challenge, Robin. I think it is really tricky to keep promoting. And I've heard once, you know, promote or perish, and it is an ongoing challenge, I think. Thank
you. And Charo, I was wondering, you've been able to raise the public profile of your organization, how you've done that, and has there been any challenges that you've faced being in Spain?
We do the promotion of our activities is through social media or on our website. Is that what you asked me? Sorry, did I understand properly?
Yes, how you've been marketing your organization.
Yes. And but there are some points that are difficult. For example, about medications, we have to be very careful because, in fact, this is a question that doctors should tell their patients. We cannot promote any medications. We can promote visibility events, of course, and it doesn't matter if they are sponsored by pharma companies, but we cannot make any promotion about medications. We can say, well, there are advances, or ask your doctor, but not spread it on social media, for example. And we are very active on social media, and this is the way most women, most patients get to know us, and we try to have a lot of information and good leaflets on our website that can be downloaded. And but for example, about printed materials, we are not very fond of them, because we know that if we are allowed to leave them in a hospital, and not all hospitals allow us to do, many of them end in the paper basket, So this is somehow difficult, because for patients that are familiar with the computers and do navigate in the internet easily, there is no problem. But there are many people in Spain that that don't find it easy yet. So this is something that we have to count on doctors to spread, or to say that we exist. That's a problem, in fact, yes. Though with this period we are living with the pandemic, many more people has known how to use the computer, but this is a problem for us.
Thank you. And Maud, I was wondering how you do outreach. You're in Malawi, Africa, and you reach a lot of rural communities. And how do you market to them? I imagine you do it in a very different way. If you could elaborate a little bit about that.
To have things like social media, maybe just for the urban areas. But where we do a lot of work, that's in the rural areas, we have to use a different type of marketing altogether. We don't have advantage of WhatsApp, Facebook, and stuff like that, because these are women who maybe just can afford just a normal phone. So the best they can get on there is maybe SMS and or text. But the other problem is that illiteracy levels, maybe they don't know how to read. So what they really depend on in these places is between the health workers and the communities themselves. They have what they call health surveillance assistants, who know much about the community but also know more about health issues. So these are the ones who stand in the gap to relay a lot of information to them. In case they do get a diagnosis, okay, in these rural areas, they're not able to diagnose if they have ovarian cancer. They have to refer them to tertiary hospitals where they do get that diagnosis. So usually when they get into those kind of places, as I said, because there's so many of them, maybe they don't get to understand what is actually happening. So they're usually referred back to where they came from in the communities. And in the communities, they have rural health workers who actually maybe try to explain, but usually it goes down to a health surveillance assistant, who's somebody who's based in the community, of whom they have known over a period of time, and who articulates more about health issues, and they're able to explain to them what is actually going on. So mostly that kind of support comes from that kind of angle. And then when you have advocates like us who go into the rural areas, we're able now to explain more to them. And mostly it's just to take the fear away, because in Malawi, people still believe cancer equals to death. So you're trying to take out that fear, trying to say, no, if this is discovered at this point in time, and if you could go through this treatment, things will be fine. So that's where the advocates, usually it's a one-on-one thing which you have to discuss with them. you cannot use social media for them because they won't understand what is going on. So usually it's either the health workers or the health surveillance assistants or the advocates who play a bigger role in trying to explain things. It might come also down to maybe if we have, let me say, gatekeepers, which are like chiefs who understand much about health issues. They're also able to explain to them what is actually going on, what processes they're going to go through. And these are the ones who actually encourage them, because if these people come back from the tertiary hospital and go back home, they might just sit down and do nothing about it. So they're there to actually say, as a referral system, saying, no, go back and get treated. So they're there to encourage them and give them information. So that's how it usually works in the rural areas here.
Thank you. And Runzi, this actually ties into one of our audience questions, but I know you get a lot of referrals from hospitals. And so do you find that as a benefit, and how do you work with hospitals? And I know also you do outreach in Africa and in India. So how do you market to those areas?
So as far as we are concerned, our international efforts are a little different from what we do here in the US. So we do work with hospitals. And so our program, Robin, the way it's designed is we do need a social worker involved to be able to evaluate the applications that we receive for verification purposes and other things. So, so we do need this partnership with our hospitals. And so initially when we started our programs, it was more of a trying to promote kind of a thing. But now after these many years, the Overcare program that we have has now reached enough, it has gained enough traction to the point where we actually get referrals directly from the hospitals because they are looking us up. So back to your question on the promotions, we really don't need to do much promotion on Overcare anymore because we do get consistent referrals from our partner hospitals. And as far as our work in India and Africa is concerned, I do agree that, the mode there is very different, especially because we are reaching a very different strata of society, or if you will, or people, women that we want to reach. They're mostly in the rural areas. And I was just, discussing with the WOCC partners just a few weeks ago is, we have to start at the elemental level when we do our programs in India versus and in Africa, because parts of Africa that we work with, because the knowledge is, we have even gone to the level where we are starting with female hygiene even before we get to the ovarian cancer level, because there's just so much that we need to do the groundwork on even before we start talking about ovarian cancer. And so those two experiences, like I said, while our work in US is much more sophisticated in comparison, our work in those areas of the world are very grassroots, to the point where we have our local volunteers go out and they're actually sitting and speaking one-on-one with our, target and a population, and basically speaking the language, which is extremely important when you are trying to reach that segment. And so our efforts in the international territories are very different compared to what we do here in the US. And also in the US, I would also answer your question on the social media that you had asked. The promotion, we also use social media pretty heavily because it is an easy way to reach the audience, and it's organic and it grows. And the good thing is that it's not just information that you're pushing out. I think via social media, you're also building a community, and which stays with you. And there is just real love that you can feel from these kinds of interactions, which is not trivial. So the marketing campaigns and the professional campaigns are great. The digital campaigns are fantastic, but social media builds that, at least in our experience, that builds that, emotional bonding that is not possible via any other kind of marketing campaign. So we invest pretty heavily in social media, especially not just to get our word out, as I said, but also to build that mental connection with our our community of survivors and caregivers. And so, yeah, our experience in the US versus in the international footprints is pretty different, and we have adapted our ways accordingly, if that answers your question.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yes, thank you so much. We had an audience question having to do with, do you ever, like, connecting one woman with another, do you ever regret making a connection? And I actually can answer that. I in all my years of nursing and in all my years of doing advocacy work, I have never once regretted connecting one woman with another, no matter what someone's outcome may be. I feel there's just something, we call our waiting room the healing room, because people just, there's nothing like meeting someone that's going through what you are. You can have a room full of family and friends and feel very alone, but when you meet someone who is sharing that same experience with you, there's no greater support than that, I think. We had another audience question about money, about funding for our programs, because they may not appear sexy. I think our programs are sexy, but so I wonder, Sue, if maybe you could comment on, our programs that you provide, or funders interested in supporting those.
Absolutely. And I think, working in the not-for-profit sector, we seek our funding via numerous channels. We've got some great high-profile brands that we work in that bring in, we've done an amazing campaign with Bonds Ovaries for Ovaries, so underwear that the concept is go over the pants. So that's how we've brought in our sort of general donations, is with some big partner campaigns. We've been really fortunate to work very closely with the Australian government, and our CEO Jane Hill's done a lot of government relations work, and we were able to get funding for our teal support program. So that's where women get access to their own ovarian cancer nurse, and we're able to get that via government and are looking to get that recurrent funding. And then working with a lot of grants. We apply for a lot of grants, and I think probably what's enabled us to have really good success there is having the consumer survey data around what's the need, and being able to really strongly articulate the need in our ask to government or to philanthropy or to grants around what are the needs of women and how we're meeting those. And we're also doing quite a lot of work in the psychosocial area of research, so gaining, more understanding of what the needs are, and then being able to take that to funders and say, we know in Australia that, over 40% of women will have depression or anxiety at some point in their treatment. So then when we're saying, well, they need access to a support nurse or a social worker, we've got the data to really support those applications. And I think that's really driving our success. But, having a really strong case to government, I think, has been one of our greatest successes in terms of getting some funding and looking to get recurrent funding.
Thank you. And I'll ask a question to all the panelists. Has there been any unexpected benefits of running a support group? I know for us, many of the women that we serve in support groups come back later as volunteers and actually become advocates and do advocacy work along with us. So I was just wondering, Runzi, have you had any unexpected benefits?
I think, it's pretty similar to what you just mentioned, because for us, what we have seen is through our support groups, not only do they come back to, help us in the future, but also they become really good friends. And, that is so important, and then it takes away our work to connect a woman to a woman, because they have now done it themselves through the support group. They probably have met each other once or twice, and then they just become friends. And we have seen it over and over and over again, Robin, that, you know, relationships are formed, and it's not just, and the beauty of it is it's just not from between the woman and the other woman, but it's also like families, you know, they get together and they become friends, and they come to our galas, they share a table, and then they're, you know, seated together and they're just enjoying the evening. And that for us, is such a pleasant, you know, unexpected result of this, because not only did they become friends, but their family members also have now, you know, kind of come together in forming that bond. So that to me is just, it's just beautiful to see. And we see this over and over again. And that's the reason why we love hosting our support groups, because as you said, I mean, this is just the bonus that we receive, right? In giving the love and the support that we give them, we get to see this beautiful results out of it. So
and so often they come back and they mentor another newly diagnosed woman, which is so nice to see. Maud, what about you? Have you seen any unexpected benefits?
A lot of it. Once you are connected to, as they've already said, you become friends. And then I think most of it is like when you have new patients coming in, we find that they work better as patient navigators while working with nurse navigators. They do help a lot in hospitals, trying to calm people down. As we said, having so many patients against one doctor. So you find that they volunteer to go and work in hospitals on certain days, that maybe to help patients who are just coming in. It might not just be ovarian cancer only, but it might be any other kind of reproductive cancer where they are able to say, we want to go and help. And on the other hand, they are quite good advocates when it comes to community campaigns, trying to encourage women that when you feel such and such symptoms, don't just sit down, go to the hospitals because they've been through it. So they're also able to help people in the communities. So that's how good they become at the end of the day.
Thank you. And does anyone offer any support services for caregivers that you could elaborate on?
Yes, we do. Well, apart from giving psychological support to patients, we do give psychological support to the families, sons, husbands, etc. And we think that's very important, because many times we have realized that the patient may be very worried and very frightened, but somehow she finds strength to fight against the illness, whereas their families do not, are not in the same case exactly. And we have found that there are many, especially children, sons, daughters, that need sessions, psychological sessions to cope with the situation. I think that's very important. We give this the psychological support and physical therapies on this, of course, not for families, but for women to improve if they have any problems about the surgeries, after the surgeries. Mm-hmm.
We have a really a very important and timely question about diversity. How do we ensure that we're relevant to all? And I just had a meeting. We had our first board meeting of the year last night, and we talked about we're going to at St. Rollman be creating a program, an educational program for Black women in an underserved community that we have not yet reached. And it was really brought to light because of the COVID pandemic and how they did not have the same access to care that other people have. And we find that in the United States, it's the same with ovarian cancer. Black women are diagnosed at a later stage and have a much poorer outcome. So I was wondering how any of you are encompassing that, the diversity aspect and in your outreach and support services. Runzi, do you want to?
Sure. So yeah, what you mentioned is so important because we actually, we do a Connect Over Coffee series, which is an informational series on video. Yesterday, we had an episode on this where we talked about health disparities in ovarian cancer. And so we do recognize that, care is not equal. And also, Robin, I would go to the extent of saying that it's not just based on ethnicities and your background, it also, your economic background. And basically we work with a lot of underserved women through our Overcare program. And so we see that consistently that, what the information they receive versus someone who is at a large center or more informed and has more access is very different. So it is not just the racial differences here, but there is even like at a basic level, there is a lot of disparity. And so, we don't have, to answer your question specifically, we don't have any specific programs which is meant for, let's say, African-American women or, Hispanic women, but we do have multilingual, information that we share, language that we share. And also we do have some of our advocates that speak a language which is different than just plain basic English, which helps. And also and the good thing is here is where our support group participants or our women who stay with us come into the picture, because let's say we do have a phone call with someone that does not speak English and she needs some Spanish translation, or we recently received a request for a Vietnamese interpreter, and so to speak with her. And so, but then we found someone within our network who was ready to volunteer for us and actually have that conversation with this lady in the language she understands. So to summarize, to answer your question, even though we do not have any program which specifically speaks to a particular minority, but I feel that our programs we adjust the programs based on, not the program, but the communication. Based on who we are reaching. And so far we have been successful in doing so. And in certain cases, in many cases, actually, our base comes out to help, and which is just been an amazing thing. So it all happens organically for us to a large extent.
Thank you. Yeah, I always worry about the woman that isn't around the table, that doesn't have the access, and kind of how do you meet that woman where she is. That's, I think, a challenge for all of us. Maud, I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit.
Okay. I'll start off saying where I actually stay is almost like close to about 100 kilometers to where we actually do our work. It's actually the northwest of the capital. So the actual reason why we went into those kind of areas, because we had to look at those disparities where we saw that women in the rural areas are not getting much help. Most of the advocacy organizations are concentrated in the urban areas. So when we work, how we get into these areas is because we have a close relationship with the government, and they're able to tell us to go into certain areas where they find that they keep getting late cases on different type of reproductive cancers, and they're able to know that in this area there's this type of cancer which is coming up, so they actually tell us to go into those areas. So that's what our organization is already doing. We're working, our organization is not based, we are based in town because maybe resources and everything, how we transfer them into those areas, but basically we are in the rural areas, and these are usually hard to reach areas. For somebody to travel, I don't know maybe to get to the next hospital, to a health facility takes almost maybe 3 hours. It's like 40 kilometers to that kind of place. So we get into these places, try to work in the satellite clinics as well. So it's that's where we already are, working with these kind of women. Yeah.
Wow, a lot of challenges.
It is. But it's when they do get helped, you just like the smile you see on their faces that they've been helped. Then that's why it's so important. The impact you have in the communities is what is important.
Yeah, that connection is so important.
Mm-hmm.
Chara, what about you? Do do you have anything that kind of encompasses the diversity?
Not exactly the same, but well, in Spain, for example, this period of pandemic with COVID has helped us somehow. It is curious, but for example, about these psychological sessions I was talking about a moment ago, they were presential, face-to-face, well, before the pandemic. And now, as it is impossible to move or to be with other people, we began to do them through Skype or any other of these means. And this has been better for people, for women, for patients who live in rural areas, for example, because they couldn't get to the psychologist office or place, and now they do, and they have their sessions without any problems. And it is something that we think, and I want to say it here. We see that is very, very important is to involve primary attention doctors, because it is, well, most of us, I was an ovarian cancer patient. Fortunately, I had my cancer 10 years ago, and I have had no relapses. But we know that most of us spend a long time before diagnosis. Well, if you are lucky, it may be 1 month or 2 months, but usually it is much longer than this. And so this cancer is very aggressive. And after when you get to the diagnosis, the cancer has spread, and the prognosis is very, very, very bad. So I think that it would be great if somehow we find a way to say it all over the world. You mean not only country by country? I think that is very, very important. We have managed to, you know that Spain is divided into 17 different communities. So they are autonomic, and every community has its own, well, not laws, but they can do things differently. And for example, in Madrid community where I live, we managed that the health service, the administration of health service, made some courses for general practitioners, primary attention doctors, and to draw attention to these very unspecific symptoms we present, so that they can suspect and send patients for testing, and try to, well, if these symptoms persist in time and so on. But I think that is very important, and we, well, that are speaking from very different countries, could do something perhaps.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank everyone. Thank our audience for attending. And I want to thank all of our panelists for giving their time and their expertise. And please do learn more about the Women's Coalition Against Cancer in Malawi, Africa, ASICO in Spain, Ovarian Cancer Australia, Overcome, and the Sandy Rollman Ovarian Cancer Foundation in the United States. And I am going to turn it back to Clara.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you so much. What a brilliant panel you've been, all of you. Really, really interesting. And again, as often is the case, there are many differences between countries, but actually a lot in common in terms of the needs of women with ovarian cancer and the fantastic work that you do. Thank you for joining us.